Hello, boxing world. I'm Scott Knight. Thank you for tuning in to another one of Real Combat Media radio interviews. Greg Haugen was an astounding fighter that made a lot of noise in the 1980s and the early 1990s. Mr. Haugen is a former three-time world champion. He won 2 titles at lightweight and 1 title at junior welterweight. Greg has fought some of the best fighters of his era: Pernell Whitaker, Hector Macho Camacho, Ray Boom Boom Mancini, Vinny Pazienza, Jimmy Paul, and the legendary Julio Cesar Chavez. Chris Cercola from Real Combat Media had the pleasure to conduct this spellbinding interview. Greg talked about his difficult childhood, how he got into boxing, his amateur fights, how he dominated tough man contests, and he also talked about the gamut of his professional career. Real Combat Media is honored to have this great man and former great fighter to take of his valuable time to give this enlightening interview.
I was born in Haugen, Washington, right outside of Seattle.
Mm-hmm. And what was your home life like?
It was pretty rough, my mom was raised by a single mother, and, she raised 6 kids, and, there wasn't a lot of luxuries, that's for sure, and, we never went without food, but, you can't say that we lived a very high lifestyle, that's for sure, and, so, I have 5 brothers and sisters, and it was pretty rough.
Mm-hmm. And where were you? Were you the oldest one or the youngest one?
I'm the oldest boy. I got an older sister who goes girl, boy, girl, boy, girl, boy. So I'm the oldest boy, and I got 2 younger brothers and 2 younger sisters, and, I'm the oldest boy there.
And what kind of kid were you? Were you a good kid?
No, I wasn't. I was always in trouble, fucking fighting, I never really stole nothing or, never got in trouble for doing none of that. All my trouble was fighting and, skipping school and, not listening. So, I had a problem with, authority figures and, I get a little bit of trouble, but nothing serious.
Sounds like me, Greg. You found the right job, I'll tell you that. Who got you interested in boxing?
Well, my dad actually, my dad was in the Marines, and, I used to get my head shaved every Saturday whether I needed it or not, and, I was a pretty small kid, and I was getting picked on a lot in the neighborhood, and, my dad got tired of that, so the guy that was shaving my head every Saturday was starting a boxing club and asked my dad if I'd like to join, and I was 5 years old, and I took to it. I liked it, and I was pretty good at it right away from what my coach said. And, it was just one of those things where it was one-on-one, and you against the other guy, and there's nobody to blame but you if you things didn't work out.
That's true. And how old were you when you first went to the gym?
5.
Wow. And you did like it right away, right? That's right.
Yeah, I did. This was back in 65, back in the day when you could fight, you had to fight 4 times on Friday and Saturday to get to the finals on Sunday. Now you can only fight once a day, once every 24 hours. And, back when we fight, you could fight 3 or 4 times just to get to the finals the day before. So, I had about 325 amateur fights, losing about 20, 25 of them, and, and I fought some of the bigger names out there. Grew up around, Tacoma Boys Club had some good fighters come out there. We had Ray Shields, Armstrong, David Armstrong, Beppis, Leo Randolph, Rocky Lockridge, so there was always good fighters in this area, so. You know, so I had some pretty good amateur experience.
So you fought nationally too?
Well, yeah, I fought a couple times nationally, but what I did is I started fighting when I was 5 years old and got tired of it, you know, all the bullshit and the politics of the amateur thing up here being run by a certain club, and so when I was 15 years old, I said, screw it, and I quit. And I quit till I was 20, and I hadn't fought in 5 years, and, you know, went back and fought in the Olympic trials after a couple months of training, and took a bronze medal in the Olympic trials, and got my nose broken the first fight, and fought 3 more fights, and ended up losing to the guy that ended eventually won the team to go to the Olympics, but that was the year that they had the boycott, you know, 1980, so nothing came of that, and then
Who was it that broke your nose?
what's that?
Who broke your nose? Like who beat you to prevent you from going to the Olympics?
Well, I forget who. I lost to a guy named Bill White, I believe, a black kid named Bill White. And he was like, he had 3 fights, and all had first round knockouts, and I ended up losing a close decision to him, and then he ended up losing to Delio Palacio, a kid that was an Olympic representative for that year.
Mm-hmm. And why did you go into the tough man competitions instead of turn pro boxing?
Well, I mean, I moved to Alaska, and you know, I just happened to be sitting in the bar one night, and my buddies, you know, we were all liquored up, and, you know, they kept trying to talk me into getting up there, you know, because it was, you know, it was basically, you know, a sideshow, because a lot of the people, you know, they were just tough guys, you know, coming in off the street, you want to fight? Yeah, how much you weigh? I weigh this much, you know, you weigh this much, you guys want to fight? Yeah, we'll fight, and that's how fights were made, so basically sat there and was watching it, and, you know, my buddies ended up talking me into it, and, you know, next thing I know, I won 24 in a row. They didn't like me up there because I was from the lower 48, whipping all the local guys, and they didn't really like me.
Mm-hmm. And when you did turn pro boxing, why did you turn pro then? What happened there?
Well, I turned pro, you know, because I really like fighting, and, you know, that was basically only the next step. I mean, you know, after fighting the amateurs and stuff, and then fighting the tough guy, you know, they were paying me, I was, you know, basically being paid for fighting, so I couldn't really go back to amateurs, and just chose to start fighting professional, you know. And my first fight was a 10-rounder, and my third fight I went 10 rounds. I've never had a 4-round fight, you know. You know, so I was more suited for the long distance. I mean, the fights that I did lose as an amateur, I'd usually lose 2-1. You know, I wasn't getting warmed up to the 3rd round, and, you know, so.
Now, I saw in your first fight. I'm sorry, I thought you were done. Were you done, Gary?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I saw in your first fight you had a 3-round decision. What happened there? How'd you get a 3-rounder?
Well, you know, it was supposed to be, you know, the guy that I took that 3-rounder from, that guy, if you look at his record, look at it, in 1980, he was number 6 or 7 in the world as a featherweight. His name was Juan Arriscato, and, you know, and I had 24 tough guy fights, and, you know, I could have started fighting, you know, I could have started off, you know, 24-0. But I didn't do that. You know, I only took 2 of those fights because, you know, the guy that I beat was a world-class fighter, and, you know, they just happened to, it was supposed to be a 4-rounder, but they ended up making a 3-rounder. I don't know why, but, you know, those 2 fights against Noah, the ones I took as, you know, start out 2-0.
Mm-hmm. And how'd you feel after your first win? Did it really impact you at all since you had tough man competitions? Were you happy?
Yeah, I was happy. I just loved the fight. I mean, it didn't matter where I went or who. I just wanted to fight. You know, I just roll them up and I'll fight.
Mm-hmm. And when did you decide to leave Seattle to go to Vegas? How much?
That was probably, 85. I was getting calls from, Vegas to come down and fight. We got several fights on short notice. So, one of my problems fighting, working living here is I never had no sparring. I couldn't do any sparring. If I had sparring, it was mediocre. Down there I could get, 100 rounds a day with 10 different world-class fighters, and and that's what you need. I mean, you need good sparring, and if you're in there with a guy that you've seen on TV or it's a world-class fighter, and you're holding your own with him, that's good brain food. That makes you believe you belong. So,
Yeah.
I think it was about 85 I moved down there.
And who trained you when you first went to Vegas?
I worked for Johnny Taco first. Johnny Taco from Johnny Taco's gym, and then he trained me for about the first, 6, 8 months, and then I got a call to fight Freddie Roach 6 days before the fight. I'd been in the gym up here working out, and I had sparred Freddie before in Taco's gym, and I was physically so much stronger than him and pushing around, and so I said, sure, I'll take the fight, and then Johnny seems like he worked with both of me and Freddie in the gym. He chose to step aside, not work either one of their corners, and after that I started working with a guy named Stan Tischler.
Mm-hmm. What's his name? Stan what?
Tischler.
Tischler?
Tischler. He was another DWG that knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Stanley, he did Vegas, so I think it's Tischler, something like that, Tischler. And Stanley, he pretty much taught me, I had a good left hook to start, but Stanley refined it and made it even better, and I worked with him for a few years after that.
Mm-hmm. And tell me more about the Freddie Roach fight. So you already sparred with Freddie, though, right? So you knew you were already stronger than him. Did you?
Yeah, I had sparred with Freddie. I had fought lightweight, but I was naturally walked around at 155 pounds. So I was losing 20 pounds per fight. I had to take time to do that. And if I was, I'd find myself so much stronger than most of the guys I fought, coming down 20 pounds, it was tough, but, I thought I had an advantage by, being stronger than them, and as long as I did it right and was smart about it, then I could, I could be strong and still be, still be hydrated enough to fight. So, it wasn't easy dropping the 20 pounds, but, it gave me an advantage over all the other guys I fought.
And then, what happened during that Freddie Roach fight? Was it a quick fight? How would you describe Freddie as a fighter?
Freddie was good. He was a tough guy, well-schooled. He worked with Eddie Fletch. So Freddie was probably, our guy's 10-0, and he was 38-8. And, they were talking about how he had more knockouts than I had fights, and, just a warm-up fight for his next fight, so when people start talking that, I like that because that means they're looking by me and they're not respecting me, and, and I got to say in it, you might beat me, but it ain't going to be easy.
Yeah. So on May 23rd, 1986, you won your first title, the NABF title. And tell me about that fight.
Yeah, I beat Edwin Corrette. Corrette was a well-schooled fighter. I've been around for a long time, worked for the Texas brothers, and came from a, stable wrangler and stuff. So he was pretty well known, and tough guy. He was a tough guy. Made a lot of people look bad. He was tough to fight, like to hold. He was kind of a big guy. He was probably the biggest fighter I fought at the time because he was, the most well-schooled fighter, and You know, so I was supposed to fight him previously before that, but he got hurt or something. He woke up the day of the fight and he was sick, and the day before the fight, so I had to end up throwing. I think the first date that I was originally scheduled to fight him, I ended up fighting a guy named King Willis, technical southpaw. That was somebody's sparring partner. Just the kind of guy that made me look bad, so, you know, I got thrown in with him the day before because Edwin couldn't fight. But I thought Edwin was just pulling a fast one on me, and so I ended up beating out Willis, and then, you know, we had a rematch scheduled for, you know, me and Edwin, and ended up fighting, and we ended up beating him in a 12-round decision.
Mm-hmm. And how did it feel afterwards holding that belt for the first time?
Oh, it felt great, you know. I mean, you know, it's, you know, right now I think the NABF belt and the USPA belt is equivalent to, is better than some of the world title belts they got out there right now, because, you know, I mean, you know, if you got, you know, you got these guys from, you know, other countries, England and shit, that come over here, and none of them have ever really done anything, and, you know, so, you know, I think those titles are sufficient, just as good as some of the world titles out there. So, I know it got me rated in the top 12, and, you know, it springboarded me into for the Jim Paul fight because, you know, I talked to Emmanuel Stewart after the fight, and I came to my wedding, and I got married 2 days later, and he told me, you know, the fact is, we didn't know who you were. You know, you were number 12 in the ratings, and we picked you because it wasn't a mandatory fight. I think they fought on the Dwayne Thomas and John Mugabe were the main event. You know, this is when the Beast was knocking everybody out, and so I was basically the semi-main event, and then they told me, you know, we picked you because you were number 12, and we hadn't heard of you, we watched some tape on you, you looked like a slow white guy, and you was right in front of me with a hit, so we chose you, and that was a big mistake, so... Mm-hmm. Yeah, that made me feel pretty good, you know, getting acknowledgement from a world-class trainer like that.
And every slow white guy in the world, too.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm right there in front of you. I might look slow, but, you know, I wasn't the fastest guy, but, you know, you know, my thing was timing, and I was a good counter puncher. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, you know, I'm going to make you miss, and I'm going to make you pay. You know, I don't have the longest arms, and I can't fight, you know, that great from outside. If you got the reach on me, then that's your advantage for you. But, you know, my fight was basically wearing him down, you know, prodding and, you know, aggressive. You know, just wearing him down with, you know, condition and pressure. Pressure kills.
And let's see. You're one of the last guys who could tell someone what it's like to fight a 15-round fight. What was that like, fighting 15 rounds?
Yeah, it's the way it should be. You know, I mean, that's the true championship territory. You know, 12 rounds and 15 is a lot. You know, I mean, if you look at it, you know, when you had those fought later, you know, there's no way they could have went 15 rounds. You know, so they paid the headman to make it a 12-round fight. You know, that difference is 9 minutes. That's a long time. If you're tired in the 12th round, you still got to go 9 more minutes. That's a mother, man. I mean, that just, you know, that's the way it should be. I firmly believe that's the championship territory. You know, it's 12 rounds crap, when people get hurt, you know, and the extra 13, 14, 15 rounds a bunch of bull. You know, that's the way it should be. You know, the American title should be 12 rounds, and the world title should be 15.
That's my next question, too. I thought you might feel that way. And then, okay, let's see. The next fight you traveled to Rhode Island, and you fought your arch enemy, I guess, Vinny Pazienza. What was that fight like? Bring me back to that night, huh? First time.
Well, I took the fight when Camacho and Rosario were the other two champions. They didn't want no part of going to Providence. But I firmly thought I could knock Vinny out. I underestimated his toughness. I know I won the fight. There's not a question in my mind I won the fight. But, fighting in his hometown, you don't always get the decisions. And, I just, it left a bad taste in my mouth after beating him up for 15 rounds and then walking out there without my title. It really pissed me off, and I just, got to the point where, Vinny had been training in these, doing all this cardio and doing these conditioning stuff, and it made me realize that I needed to step my game up. I needed to go a little more harder training, and, it opened my eyes to some things as far as, I got to do more to be a better fighter. So, the second fight, I went home and, I was pissed off and I wanted to get my belt back, and I just trained even harder, and, I was going 2 days, and I had a cardio conditioning doctor that, I worked with Larry Holmes, and, this guy was good, Doc Clevin, he was out of Vegas, and I just stepped my game up. I had, if I'm going to compete with the better guys out there, then I need to be in better shape.
Mm-hmm. And you felt you won that fight, right?
Yeah, second fight, I just pounded him. It was pretty much like the first fight, but it wasn't in his hometown. It was, we had an agreement, we had an agreement where I come to Providence and fight you, and if there's any controversy or the fight's close, and if you win, I get a rematch and you fight me in Vegas. But, you didn't have the balls to do that, and then like the reporters were saying, well, at least it's not Vegas, or at least it's not Providence. What's the difference? 100 miles and 10,000 acres. We're, an hour away from where he grew up in Atlantic City. As far as I'm concerned, it was still, a hometown crowd, and I just had to go out there and really leave no doubt about it, but I did have a lot more people on my side this time in the second fight than I did the first fight because it wasn't in his hometown. So, the second fight was pretty much a new copy of the first fight, but I just threw more jabs. I controlled the fight with my jab, and, I was just in a little better shape, and you never gave him a chance.
Mm-hmm. And, what did Vinny say to you after you beat him in the second fight? How was your relationship like with Vinny Pazienza after the second fight?
Oh, well, he knew that, I had owned him in the second fight. And basically, he knew they're fighting. He's been fighting as long as we have. When a guy has your number, and when you've been beat. And he knew he got beat in the first fight, and he knew he got beat in the second fight. So, there wasn't much he could say. I mean, I had his number, and, he was the darling of the East Coast, and, I was the nobody from the West Coast, so.
And did he admit to you ever that he lost the first fight, that he thought he should have?
Oh, no, he'll never admit that. He'll never admit that. He knows, anytime you've been in there fighting, and, you've been doing as long as we have, when you lost the fight. And, Vinny pretty much knew there was no, I think there was 42 press guys from all over the country, Sports Illustrated, everybody. 40 of them had me winning. The only 2 that didn't have me winning was the 2 from Providence. So, I knew that I won that fight. I was pissed off, and I wanted to get my title back, and, so I just went and trained harder and stepped my game up, and, showed him that, that I won the first fight, no doubt.
Yep. And when I always think about you and Vinny, I always thought you guys, hated each other. Is that true, or?
Well, yeah, there was no friendship during the fights. I respect the hell out of him now, but we're friends, but we don't hang out. He lives on the East Coast, I live on the West Coast. We see each other every once in a while, and there's a lot of mutual respect there, and we went 40 rounds together, and 2 15-rounders and, a 10-rounder, there was a lot of respect, but, he was with the Dubas, and, he was getting all the publicity, and, he was the golden boy, and this, that, and the other, but, after the first fight, I knew that I won the fight, and pretty much, with each fight, I just kept getting more confidence. I beat Jimmy Paul, who was supposed to be the best champion out of the three, had the best jab. I took his jab away after 2 rounds. After beating him, beating Edmund Correct, beating Vinny, I started believing I belong. That's a lot. You get to that point in fighting, it's 75-80% mental. It's more mental than it's physical because everybody knows how to fight. It's just doing the little things, doing little things here, a little advantage here, a little advantage there, a little advantage there. Those little advantages add up. Pretty soon they become one big advantage, and you need every little advantage you can get. It's a tough, rough game.
Mm-hmm. And then a couple of fights later, you fought Gert Bo Jacobson in Denmark, right?
Yeah, I fought Gert Bo. I think he was 26-0 with 24 knockouts. He was a European champion.
How did you like traveling to Denmark? What was that like in Denmark? They treat you?
Oh, I loved it. It was one of the greatest countries I ever been to. It's beautiful, beautiful country. Women are beautiful, friendly. I got over there, and I was loud and obnoxious and boisterous, and they thought I was crazy because the people over there are pretty quiet, and I'm over there, I'm going to break his fucking ribs, I'm going to break him down, I'm going to bust his ribs, because he was no taller than me, so I just kept psyching him out every time we'd give a press photo, press shoot and stuff, I'm going to break your ribs, dude, I'm going to break your ribs, ribs for dinner. So I just started getting in his head, trying to psych him out, and then people over in Denmark thought I was crazy, but yeah, it's probably the best place out of all the places I got to travel for boxing that, I can remember going.
And what kind of fighter was he? Describe the fight itself to me, were you shocked by it?
Gert Bo was, he was probably 5'10", and good puncher, and, but he had had a bunch of wins against a lot of fading ex-good fighters from America, and so when I got over there, I had Eddie Italiano, my cut man, and, I had Eddie in the corner, or Eddie over there in the dressing room to watch him wrap hands, and they were trying to use that fucking gauze where, turn some plaster after a few rounds, so we made him rewrap their hands, and he wasn't going to rewrap his hands. He refused to rewrap his hands. So I told the promoter, I said, well, here's the deal, dude. You got 10,000 people out there that you're going to have to explain to why there's not a main event, because I'm not going out there. I'm not fighting until he rewraps his hands with the legal gauze. So they bitched and moaned about it, and finally they did it, and and he ended up, he was a good fighter. I mean, he hadn't lost for a reason, and, he was a typical European fighter, real stand-up, straight-up fighter, but he was tall, he was probably 4 or 5 inches taller than me, so he had the reach on me, and I pretty much just, I was confined to fighting an in-fight. My fight was on him. Each fight, each opponent's going to pose different problems. So with Gert Bo, he was, he was pretty much like Jimmy Paul. You got to avoid the jab, and you got to get inside, and you got to break him down. So, I think I stopped him in the 8th round. But he was a tough guy. He was a real tough guy, and they thought he was invincible there because, he hadn't lost. He was 26-0 and knocking everybody out. So, I got over there and I was, talking to him, telling him I was going to, destroy him, this and that. And they thought I was, a loud, obnoxious American. And so, it didn't really matter what they thought, at that point, it's more head games, you're trying to psych him out and, get into his head so he's thinking about you and, not thinking about the fight, because you got a guy that, constantly thinking about things, about the fight, and fighting the fight over and over in his head, it's going to mentally and physically wear him out. You can't do it. You can only fight the fight one time, and you got to do it, in the ring. But, you start worrying about all the stuff, there's certain things, like I used to drop little hints at press conferences, I'm here, I'm in great shape, You know, I trained hard for this fight. And, you know, only he knows if he trained like he should have. You know, when he's alone and he's sleeping, you know, when he's in bed by himself and doesn't have all his buddies around telling him how great he is, only he knows if he did the right thing. If he cut corners or if he did the right thing and trained hard as he could have and should have. You know, and if the guy didn't, he starts wearing on him, you know, they start thinking about that 2 or 3 days before the fight, you know, and it's something that consumes his thoughts all the time, and, you know, that's psychological warfare. And that's an advantage for you. I mean, you know, it's, like I said, it's a rough, tough game, and if you can get a little advantage here, a little advantage there, it's going to add up to, you know, one big advantage. So, stuff like that, you get in guys' heads and you try to psych them out. Psychological warfare.
Yeah. Yep. And then the next fight you fought, Pernell Whitaker. Tell me what that's like.
That was a nightmare. You know, anytime you're fighting a good southpaw that's quick, fast, hard to hit, you know, southpaws a total different, you know, game. I mean, you know, they got the advantages on you because the fact that there's so few southpaws, you know, it's like when you see 2 southpaws doing that fight. They're looking at each other like, what the hell do I do? You know, they're lost because, you know, it's not something that they usually see. You know, whereas the southpaw, everything's opposite. You know, the jab usually doesn't work on him. You know, it's more right hands, left hooks, and keeping your left foot outside of his. It's more foot control. There's a lot more that goes into fighting a good southpaw. You know, and I mean, if you're fighting a smart, good southpaw, it's fast. It's just, you know, it's a nightmare. You know? It's just, you know, and Whitaker, you know, out of all the guys that I fought, Whitaker's by far the best guy that I fought.
Yeah. And what's it like when you, I mean, were you able to hit him at all in that fight? How did you feel when you could not hit him solid with anything?
Oh, I was getting a little frustrated, but I was hitting him, you know, but, you know, he's the kind of guy that you're not going to hit with two shots. You know, you might give him 1, you know, but you're not going to hit him with two good shots or 3 good shots to, you know, to hurt him. You know, it's going to be 1 good shot, and, you know, you're the kind of guy you just can't get frustrated. You got to fight your fight, you know, and go out there, and, you know, but that was a fight that I wasn't real happy about fighting. You know, I mean, I'm a champion, and I had an idiot for a manager. You know, and yeah, sure, he'll fight anywhere. He'll fight in your hometown, no problem. You know, for a couple $1,000 more, we'll fight in your hometown. He was an idiot. You know, it was just to the point where I was tired of being a champion and being fighting on the road all the time. You know, I mean, I like some hometown cooking now and then. You know, I mean, I like people cheering for me instead of me, you know. I also love going in and, you know, and going in and quieting down 10, 20,000 people, and, you know, the opposing opponents, fans, and quieting them down, not giving them anything to cheer about. That's also a great feeling, too. But, you know, it's nice to have a little home cooking once in a while and fight in your own town. You know, and it just got to the point where, you know, I was frustrated having to fight in Whitaker in Virginia. And, you know, and it wasn't my best fight. You know, he beat me in a 12-round decision. You know, I'm not, you know, that's not something I'm embarrassed about, you know, because he beat a lot of good fighters. So, you know, those are the kind of guys you can't get frustrated with. You just got to keep prodding, you know, and keep just keeping your game plan. You know, even though you're not able to land a lot of shots on the guy, you know, you're missing more than you're landing. You just got to keep from getting frustrated. And it's just pretty hard to do with you know, a fighter like Whitaker.
Yeah. And a couple wins later, you fought Vinny again. Tell me your thoughts of the third fight.
Well, the third fight, you know, was supposed to be at 140, then couldn't make weight. Yeah, then, you know, giving him the extra 2 pounds, which was a stupid thing on my part. I should have never done that. I didn't really know the rules back as well as I do now. And so we ended up letting him slide on the 2 pounds, and he came out and ran like Carl Lewis. You know, he knew that he couldn't beat me standing in front of me or outboxing me, so he came out and ran, P-pat, run, P-pat, run. So, you know, they gave him a decision, and it is what it is.
Yeah. Now, I saw last week on Facebook that Vinny sent you a message. Now, who befriended you on Facebook?
Oh, I don't know how that came about. My old girlfriend bought me a computer last year. I wasn't even online. I didn't even get on the computer. Didn't know shit about it. Started dating this girl from California. She decided she wanted to buy me a computer because she, I went out with her. I met her the first night. I started talking to her, and I said, "If you want to know anything about me, just Google me." And, fucking looked me up on the computer. She went home and checked it out and found out I had about 35 or 40 pages on Wikipedia or whatever it was, and she was pretty surprised at that. So we started talking, and she's asking me, you need to get online. I just said, why do I need to get online? And she said, well, that's the new thing, this is, the computer's a new age, so she bought me a computer. I started getting online. Next thing I know, I got 5,000 friends, and I don't know. I still respect Vinny. We're still buddies. I'd like to think that we're still good enough buddies where if I see him, we'll have a beer together, reminisce old times. There's no hard feelings. I don't have any hard feelings against anybody that I fought. If they have hard feelings against me, oh well, that's their own fucking problem. It's not something that I can control. But they're in there to try to win, and I'm in there to try to win. It's just the way it is. And that was a long time ago, and if they still have problems and issues with me, well, then I don't know what to say. But, I know that I respect everybody that I fought, because it's not for everybody. It's a rough, tough game that, to be in the spots that we were, to be the very elite of the elite, that's less than 1% of the guys fighting. I knew I could fight. I knew I was a good fighter, but it's just a matter of getting out there and matching your skill against the guys that you see on TV and that can fight and are good and holding your own against them, and that just, that tells you belong. So, and just, I got to the point where I knew I could fight. I was the best of them. If I was in good shape, I could fight. And if I wasn't in good shape, then I usually wasn't, as good a fighter because my fight dictated on pressure. I had to pressure guys and pressure those guys down.
Mm-hmm. And on the computer last week, Vinny said he's ready for round number 41. What's happening there?
Well, Vinny's going about 200 now, and I'm still $140, so I don't think so. But we go back and forth on the thing. We razz each other sometimes. He said one of my buddies pair of sign gloves, beat Haugen 2 out of 3. And, he just tries to get my goat. It don't bother me. It was a long time ago because, I know in my mind and heart that I won the fight. I won the two or three fights anyway. It's not all 3. And, it is what it is. I'm not going to worry about shit that happened 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Hold on one sec. Who is it? Okay, hold on. I'm on the phone now. I'll tell you when I'm off, okay? I'm sorry, my nieces.
Kids.
Dang it. So, let's see. How'd you feel when Vinny got messed up in the accident? Did you go see him at all?
Yeah, I felt bad for him. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but, it is what it is, and he got messed up, and he ended up taking his roids and come back. He fought twice at 135 pounds, and once at 140, and then he comes back at 175. Come on. It's obviously steroids, and it's just sort of things, it's, he's lucky to be alive for one, but I'm not I'm not gonna judge anybody for what they do, but I knew that he was on the juice, and he was lucky to be alive, so
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tell me about the first fight with Hector Camacho. Did you hate him going into that fight?
Yeah, I feel like that. We had some experience from the living. When I lived in Alaska, Hector came up, I think it was in 81 or 82. He was getting ready to fight John Montez in Alaska. You know, he's moving up from junior lightweight to lightweight. And so they had a little some sparring sessions set up for me and Hector. You know, we're going to go once, spar on Friday, and then, spar a couple times on Saturday. You know, like the first day we went up to Anchorage, Sheridan, you know, and there was probably, a few hundred people in there watching it. And he come out trying to load up on me, trying to knock me out. You know, I said, okay, well, what's good for you is good for me. So, I started throwing bombs back, and, bloodied up his nose and mouth, and, so they ended up calling me that night and telling me that the Saturday spar was off because Hector was leaving town. Well, come later on that night, I seen him at the Topless bar, and, hey, I thought you were leaving, and he thought he was, Joe Cool, this and that, and so come time when I was fighting, he thought he was taking me as a tune-up fight, because it was supposed to be, originally scheduled to build his Battle of the Undefeated Champion, him and Chavez. So, he was basically taking me as a tune-up fight, and it's kind of pissed me off because I'm not a tune-up fight for anybody. And, I knew Hector. I studied him, and, I knew that Hector only liked to fight a minute and a half each round, and he'd bullshit the other half around. And, the ref says break, he'd walk behind the ref, he liked to hold on, and he was a master of stalling. He's the kind of guy, he's just like Whitaker. You're going to hit him, but you're not going to hit him with more than one good shot at a time. He's smart, elusive, so, and I knew that, if I came in and fought in 3 minutes of every round, that, by 6, 7th round, he's going to be tired because, that's as much as he's fought in the whole fight. So, my thing was just to go out there and pressure him and talk to him. I was talking to him the whole fight, hitting him in the belly. I could hear him wincing, and before the fight, this old man came up to me and told me, yeah, Hector's been in the sauna for the last hour and a half, all morning, and I just said, okay, well, I didn't know if it was a psych out, a plan to try to, psych me out to, see what was going on. But when Hector stepped on the scale, he had these leopard skin, underwear on, and he was like 140 and a half. So he had to take his underwear off, and when he took his underwear off, they were soaking wet. Well, that told me that the old man was telling me the truth. And he was in the sauna getting, losing weight. So when he stepped off the scale, he started sucking. He had this 2-liter bottle of 7-Up, and this, the ice little thing of the bucket of ice, they put in the room to, the real bucket that you put ice in. Well, Hector had that full of chopped up oranges, cleaned up oranges, and he started eating these oranges like a madman and started sucking this 7-Up down, so that told me right there he's dehydrated. And that's, and it was the morning of the weigh-in, and that's telling me that there's no way he's going to be able to rehydrate himself for the fight time. So, that proved to me even more so that I had to go out and turn the heat on and just, and really pressure him even more to get him tired. So, I did, and it was wearing him down, and, it worked.
Mm-hmm. And you beat him for the first time. How'd that feel to beat that guy?
Oh, it felt great. It was a wonderful thing, and I knew the fight was close. Anytime you're a champion, and my thinking is you need to beat the guy decisively and make it no doubt in their mind that you took the title from the champion. So, I thought there could be a little indecision there on the judge's part, and I think it was a majority draw. I think one of them had it a draw, a majority decision. I think one of them had it a draw, and then the other two had me winning. So, it was great, and then and I tested positive for marijuana, and there wasn't control. It wasn't a fucking control. It wasn't a it wasn't an enhancement. It didn't do me any good. If anything, it did me any harm. So, and after that fight, I just went back and got in even better shape for the rematch. And, and I thought I'd beat him again in a rematch. Even he thought so, because if you look at the fight, he left the ring. And, the first fight, they're telling me I got him. The only reason I won the title is because I goaded him into taking a point away. Or I won the fight because he took a point away. Because I didn't want to touch gloves in the 12th round. There's no rule that says you have to touch gloves in the first or the 12th round. There's only a rule that says you have to touch gloves in the first round. But I didn't want to touch his gloves. I was calling him a Puerto Rican faggot and everything, a whole fight, and, so there was a lot of bad blood there, and I didn't want to touch his gloves, and I put colors for you. No, I don't want to touch your gloves. Well, and he got mad at that, and he tried to sucker punch me again. He missed, and they ended up taking a point away from me. Well, if you watch the second fight, I did it again in the 11th round. They took a point away from him again, for being frustrated and stuff, because I was talking in the whole fight. Well, after the 12th round, he ended up going back he walked back to the dressing room, knowing that he lost the fight. Well, Dan Duber talked to me, come on back. We got the judges. Don't worry about it. And I ended up losing that decision. So, there's definitely a couple fights that, I know that I won and I didn't get the call for against world-class fighters and Vinny and Hector. It is what it is. You can't cry over spilled milk. You start crying about it, people think you're a crybaby, and they'll like you even less. But you take it like a man and say, hey, it is what it is, and I'm going to have to come back and prove that I won the first fight.
Yeah. And how did it feel winning that WBO title? It wasn't really respected yet, but you still beat a pretty good guy.
Well, I was more happy beating a guy that was like 36 or 38. And he had, he beat a lot of good fighters, and, he was definitely a world-class fighter. He was as far as I'm concerned, he was the cream of the crop in junior lightweight. There was nobody out there that was as good as him. And they moved up to lightweight, where you had, a few more competitors with Rosario and Jimmy Paul, me, and you look back on it, if you look back, it ain't like it is now. I mean, now it's a bunch of crap. But, if you look back in our day in the 80s and stuff, you had 6, 7, 8 good guys in every weight class. Mm-hmm. I mean, every weight class. I mean, so I was at the point of thinking, hey, I belong with these guys, so, it tends to make you feel good.
It's definitely not the same. Totally different now. Let's see. So you do say he's an all-time great. You give that to Hector. You stay in touch with him at all?
No, I don't. I'm Facebook friends with him, and his son. I seen his son here when I was down in Florida probably about 6 months ago. And I seen Hector Jr. and talked to him a little bit. We told him to tell his dad hi, but. I don't know, Hector's kind of a fuck-up now, he's been in prison, and I don't know what he's doing, but he was doing the right thing, I know that.
Mm-hmm. And the next fight you retired Boom Boom, what's your memories of Boom Boom Mancini?
Well, I remember that, he'd been retired for a few years, and then he came out of retirement and fought Camacho in a close 12-round fight. A lot of people thought they beat him. So he was going to pick somebody to fight, and he picked me. Because once again, he got as a slow white guy that's right there in front of him to be hit, and and he found out that wasn't the case. So. Like I told Ray, back doing a press conference, this is the best acting Ray's ever done in his life, acting like he's going to beat me. He can't get a job as an actor, so he's going to come back to fight. So, he was getting a lot of attention, and, he running his mouth, so I tried to goad him into saying it. Didn't take all, but, he wouldn't do it. So I got him to goad him into betting 50 grand on it.
Take me to Mexico now. How'd that fight come up with Chavez?
Oh, well, it was supposed to be where we were supposed to fight in Vegas originally at the Mirage. Things didn't work out. Ended up fighting him in Mexico City. That's a fight. That's the only regret of my whole career is that fight, not being in great shape for that fight. I was going through divorce with my ex-wife and, my childhood sweetheart. And, my mind wasn't even close to being, anywhere near what it needed to be to fight a guy like that. And, I wasn't in shape and, I went into a fight and he hit me with I've never seen the fight, but I got the film in my mind. I threw a lazy jab, first punch, boom, he countered it with a hard right hand, not being in shape, took my legs away. So I pretty much basically trying to survive from then on because it was the first time I'd ever, been in a fight and been hit. I've been hit some good shots, but I've always been good enough shape to absorb them shots and come back. But that fight, I wasn't in no shape, didn't have any legs, and he hit me in the first round, and that was pretty much the fight right there. I've been on 110% fighting a guy like Chavez, he's going to be exposed to it pretty quick, and I was. And so, looking back, that's the only regret I have. Representing the United States of America, didn't represent very well. And, like I said, I fought the toughest guys in the world, but I've never been brought to my knees like a woman can do it, just by saying a few words.
My wife shocked me wanting a divorce too, man. I know exactly what you mean. It's devastating, man. Just, when you went to Mexico, did anything surprise you about being in Mexico?
Just how nasty it was, the poverty and just the people there. I had death threats and, I had a 24-hour bodyguard or these federales would sleep outside my door, and if I went and ran or I went late, and they'd follow me. And I pretty much had 24-hour bodyguards because I had a lot of death threats there. And, people weren't real friendly to me. Mm-hmm. I didn't expect that, at the time, Chavez was like Elvis, there's not a lot to get excited about in Mexico. He was definitely a great fighter and top of his game, and, so, he was like the biggest thing in Mexico. So, it was a little strange, and, being in a strange environment with death threats and shit, and it wasn't real comfortable. But once I got in there, I would always be comfortable in the ring, no matter what. If I got, it didn't matter what. So as soon as I got in the ring, I was comfortable because I was at home in there. But I just knew that I wasn't in any kind of shape for that fight. My wife shows up a couple days before the fight to fuck my head up even more. And, it's just one of those things where I was stuck. I couldn't cancel a fight, couldn't pull out of it. I wasn't known for pulling out of fights, and fought many fights with injuries and stuff. And a lot of guys would have pulled out. I just wasn't me. I wanted to fight. I wanted to fight all the time. Didn't matter who, where, what, when. But I knew going in that fight I was in a bit of trouble because of the fact that I hadn't trained at all for the fight. And you got to be in top of your game fighting a guy like that.
Mm-hmm. And when you got to the arena and you saw all those people there, was it like scary at all fighting in front of 130,000 people?
They were throwing fucking piss on us as we were going in the ring, throwing pesos from the third level, throwing bags of shit on us and at us, and it was ugly. It was probably a 300-yard walk from the dressing room to the ring. And we got pelted with everything.
What did they throw? I thought you meant like literal shit. Was it?
Well, literally bags of shit they were throwing at us.
Yeah.
Cups of piss. My trainer was telling me, you see how many beers they're throwing at us? I should never seen a Mexican race to beer. That ain't beer, buddy. That's piss. Yeah, we got pelted with pesos. We had these Mexican flags with sticks, that were on these sticks, and they were trying to stick us with them, and so it was brutal.
if you did beat him, that would be even crazier.
Well, yeah, we had a plan, we had a plan with the flight routes and everything, we were just going to go under, we were just going to dive under the ring and tell it, because there was a certain area around the ringside that, there was only a certain amount of people in, and most of them were cops. Federales, plain clothes, and as soon as the fight was over, if I was to win, we were all going to go dive under the ring until they could get the arena cleared.
That's scary. That's horrible.
Yeah, so it was definitely, it was a different adventure than what I was used to.
Hold on one second. So, let me see. The first time that Chavez hit you with a body shot, how'd that feel? What'd you think when you felt that liver shot?
Typical liver shot. I mean, I've been hit better shots than that, but as a week, hit me with a couple that hurt just as bad, you don't have to be hard, you just got to be pinpoint, and so yeah, I mean,
I always thought
I wasn't really thinking about how they felt, I was more thinking about survival.
Yeah. It's hard to concentrate with all this stuff going on. Maybe if it was America, divorce.
Yeah, it's a choice I made, but, it's in the Guinness Book of World Records now, and it should last for a long time, but, it's not one of my more prouder moments, no doubt about it.
And, let's see, a couple fights later you fought Tony Lopez. What do you remember about him?
I remember I fought that fight with, I had 5 abscess teeth, and man, I had no energy. First 5 rounds, I remember dominating him, outboxing him. Then the last 5 rounds, the infection set in, and I slowed down, and he was tagging me with those loopy overhand rights, and I just couldn't get out of the way. I had no legs, and the next day I went and had 5 teeth pulled out and felt like a new man. But, I had sparred Tony, up in the Big Bear. We had some workout sessions and stuff, and, me and Tony, there was a lot of respect between the two of us going into that fight. I knew he was a good fighter, and, I knew he was going to be right there in front of me to fight, and he was, and, normally when I'm warming up after 5 rounds, this time I died after 5 rounds, and Tony came on, and he weathered the storm, and he was able to come back and stop me.
Yep. And, so Tony Lopez hit pretty good, huh? Good hitter?
I didn't hit that hard. I mean, it was just basically accumulation of punches and me not being able to get out of the way of them. Because I had no legs. I was basically dead in the water, so he was tagging me. And, I tagged him a lot of good shots in the first 4 or 5 rounds, and I got to give him his props for standing up to some of the shots that I hit him with, and he still was able to stand in there and survive. So, you got to give it to him.
Yep. And, let's see. What did it mean winning the WBF title in your third fight?
Nothing.
It meant nothing to you?
Nothing. It's a mediocre belt. I was more happy about winning the NABF belt than I was about that. Because, basically the NABF belt's got more credibility. You're a champion of the United States. We're the best fighters in the world are from the United States. You've got all these other guys from other countries that come over here, and they're the greatest fighter in their country, and they come over here, and they're just another average guy. So it didn't mean a whole lot to me. It was a title that I tried to,
You're an honest.
hold, with pride, but, it was one of the new things, and there's not a lot of credibility to it, so it didn't mean a lot, really.
So your pride was more just that you beat the guy instead of you didn't want to, you didn't care.
Yeah, I mean, I was more just beating the guy. The titles were nice and stuff, but I'm more into beating you and not having you beat me. I mean, it's a tough game out there. And then there were good guys there every time. Well, something bad could happen.
And then you went to Denmark again, and you fought Thomas Damgaard. What do you remember about Damgaard?
I remember the first round, I beat him up, outboxed him, boxed his ears off, and in the second round he came out and started leaping into his big guy, a big old fucking headbutts, and headbutted me in the second round, and it was the first time that I had been cut to a blood was in my eye. I couldn't see, so they ended up stopping the fight. You know, he was at in Denmark, you're not going to do any favors over there.
And what's...
So yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry, go on, finish up.
yeah, he was a decent fighter, strong, you know, but, you know, I was old at the end of my career, but I know they were happy to see, you know, the good little fight avenged.
Did you know you were, like, way past it? Some fighters act like they don't know. Did you know that you...
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I'm going 10 rounds with guys I should be knocking out, you know, like, after that, you know, I mean, I was getting to the point where I knew that, you know, my time was coming, you know, I was coming up to the end, and that, you know, I didn't have much longer to fight because it's a young man's game, and, you know, and when I'm going 10 rounds with guys I should be taking out in, you know, 4 or 5 rounds, that's telling me it's time to get out.
Mm-hmm.
Fighting is not a fight, you know, a sport you can be mediocre at. If you are, you're going to get hurt. You know what I mean? I'm not into getting hurt. I didn't like, you know, I didn't like losing. I hated losing, you know, and so I wasn't going to hang around and be, you know, and just fight to be competitive or make money. I mean, if I didn't have a chance to win the fight every time, I didn't want to fight. So, you know, it wasn't going to do me no good to hang around and fight all these up-and-coming guys because I was just too competitive. I wanted to win every time. And so, you know, it's time to maybe call it a career.
Yeah. And what's the happiest thing that you ever... What do you look back at as the proudest moment of your career?
It's hard to say, you know, I had a few of them, but yeah, I have to say, you know, winning my first world title against Jimmy Paul, a guy that, you know, was a 4-1 favorite. You know, I was supposed to be the best lightweight at the time, had the best jab, and, you know, and I was you know, just in a warm tune-up for him. So I have to say that's got to be one, and the Camacho win is the other one. You know, there's an opponent.
Mm-hmm. And ESPN said that you're the best Alaskan ever. What's that mean to you?
Oh, I am, huh?
Yeah, ESPN said.
Wow. That's quite a privilege. Well, you know, I won the last lightweight title. I guess I'm still champion. Nobody ever, you know, tried to, you know, challenge me for it. So, you know, I learned a lot from Alaska. You know, I mean, I was fighting guys up there, you know, yeah, I had a lot of amateur fights, and, you know, I was fighting guys out there that didn't, you know, weren't the most skilled fighter, but, you know, there was times I was giving up, you know, 60, 70, 80 pounds. You know, so I had to be smart, and I had to use my head, and I had to, you know, go out there and think without getting hit. So, you know, I mean, it tends to make you a better fighter because, you know, you have to be a thinking fighter. You know, I mean, dumb fighters don't last long. You know, I mean, if you don't have a brain and you don't use it, you're not thinking, you know, constantly, you know, it's like a good game of chess. When you're thinking 2, 3 moves ahead before you set this guy up, making him think you're going to do something that you're not going to do, and then he commits to it, and by then it's too late. You know, it's like, I remember, you know, I remember when I fought Charlie White Lightning Brown. He was 29-2, and then he lost to Henry Roy and another champion. And so, you know, once again, they were talking about him being, you know, having more knockouts than I had fights. So I remember the bell ringing. I ran out across the ring, and I bent into him. I'd been in with him, and I see him cock his right hand back. So I pulled out of there, and I'm telling myself, okay, I'm going to go back in there. I'm going to stay there just a little bit longer and see if he does that again. So I did it again. I went in there, boom, stayed there. Sure enough, he pulled his hand back to it, committed himself. I pulled back just a little bit, boom, I hit him in the left hook, the fight was over. You know, I mean, those are things, you know, like with Chris Calvin. I remember him, you know, in the first round, he hit me with a shot that almost knocked me out. I was basically out on my feet. I was blacked out, and my body was tingling, but I was conscious enough to know that I got hit with the right hand, and I needed to duck under and grab a hold of him and miss the left hook. And then in the tape, you watch it, and he just misses the left hook. Well, I noticed he was throwing his jab. He was, throwing his jab, and he kind of dropped it. Jab, drop, jab. He's doubling up his jab. So I told myself, after that first jab, I'm going to come in with it behind the first jab with an overhand right. And I hit him with an overhand right on the equilibrium, and it knocked his balance off, and that was the fight. I ended up knocking out of the ring and stopping him. Those are things you got to be looking at. You got to be conscious of it. He's constantly looking at the guy and making him think you're going to do something you're not going to do. Because, once he commits himself to what he thinks you're going to do, he's dead in the water.
Mm-hmm.
There's no taking it back.
Yeah. And how did you feel when you got inducted into the California Hall of Fame?
Well, I was really happy about that. It was an unexpected surprise. Mm-hmm. Maybe one of these days Ed Bresci put me in the one in the international, but I haven't had the best of employees with Ed. I called him on a few things. I don't think they run it where they should. It's those guys in there. I don't think they're deserving to be in there. There's guys that aren't in there that deserve to be in there. So it's basically a popularity contest.
Yeah.
I thought it was more so for what you did in the ring and not who you didn't piss off.
You belong there, Greg. You belong, man.
Well, maybe one day we'll see.
Yeah, I think you'll make it. You just gotta maybe kiss a little ass, but you won't do that. I just hope it.
Well, hopefully it'll be before I die, and then I won't have to do post 2 years.
I was just gonna say that. I hope.
Yeah, so I don't know. We'll see if it does. If it doesn't, I had fun, and I fought the best fighters out there, and most of the time in their hometown, and I fought anybody and everybody, and nothing to be ashamed of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you'll make it. And let's see, what do you do now? You're training fighters now? Is that what you do?
Yeah, I got a few guys I'm working with. I'm getting ready to open a gym here in the city of Seattle for underprivileged kids and for kids that are in trouble and being locked up and in gangs and stuff. So I'm working with some troubled youth, and we're going to be running a gym here pretty quick. I think it's going to open in the next couple of months. Working with troubled kids that are locked up, and it's going to be our chance to get out of being locked up, and we got to go to school, and they got to go to the gym, and they got to learn how to fight. And they got to stay out of trouble. If they can do that, and then keep from being locked up. That's not asking a lot, we're going to try to make productive, member of the society for these kids.
That's great. That was great. And, it's important to do that. Take care of
I like working with kids. Most of them don't have egos and attitudes yet. And you can tell them they're like little sponges. They absorb the information, and you can mold them, and shape their minds to do good things. But if they're already in that mindset where I'm going to do what I want to do, and nobody's going to stop me, then we're going to have a tough job ahead. So we're going to be working with troubled kids, and it's something I'm passionate about. I grew up, not having much. My mom raising 6 kids. We come from a pretty poor family, and so I know where a lot of these kids are coming from. They're on the street, and they don't have any supervision, and they don't have anything good to keep them out of trouble. We got people telling you, "Oh yeah, come join the gang," and come get high, or come sell dope. It's hard for a kid to say no when they don't have any other options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank God.
So,
thank God.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing, and hopefully we'll be hearing something from me.
And you don't have a gym now, or you do have a gym, right? You do have one.
I don't have one right now. I was working out my kids in a different gym. I haven't really opened my own gym. There's really not enough kids here to do that with. Washington hasn't produced many good fighters in the last 20 years. You know, I mean, mainly because we lost our amateur program, you know, and it's like baseball, when they got to, they got the little leagues, and they got, they got all the pony league, and they got to, from the time you're 5 years old, you can play all the way up till you're, a teenager or more, and then you can go to college and get scholarships for playing baseball, stuff like that. I mean, it's so we just want to, produce some productive kids in society and give them a chance, and and that's what it's all about. Just having a chance to do it. If you get a chance, you got to take that chance and run with it. If you don't make the best of that opportunity, then you get the chance, or then maybe it wasn't for you.
And why do you stay so away from the public eye? Like, why don't you ever make appearances anywhere? I never see you anywhere. How come?
Nobody wants me.
Why don't you do maybe guest spots on ESPN ever in the studio? Maybe why don't you do that?
They've never asked me to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it's because I'm stuck up here in the corner of this country and nobody knows us. You can't get any much farther away from Connecticut than the state of Washington. There's not a lot of advertising, there's not a lot of television here, it's not a big TV market. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to do that, too. I'd love to get into commentating, and stuff like that. I think I'm good at it. I know I'm better than that idiot Teddy Atlas who wasn't in a fight, but, he says some of the stupidest shit I've ever heard. It doesn't make any sense at all, and what's his claim to fame? We're working with Customato. Big deal. You never were a fighter, Teddy. What do you know? So, I mean, there's a lot of things out there I'd like to do, but, maybe been aggressive about it, I'm just comfortable here living, taking care of my kids and watching my grandkids grow up. So if something comes up, I'm talking to these people right now about a movie I'm trying to sell. I got a buddy who wrote a script for me about my story, which is a far better story than the Ricky Ward story. I mean, Ricky never won any titles, and he's claimed the fame a couple tough body fights. Big deal. I got a much better story than him, so I had a buddy like that, or a screenplay. We're trying to get it sold right now, but it takes time. All that stuff takes time, and it is what it is, and I'm not going to go out of my way to worry about it. If something happens, it happens. It's great. I'd love to do it. I'm all for it.
You should be commentating, man. Not too many people could talk and express themselves.
Well, that's it. I mean, there's a lot of guys that I fought out there that are really fucked up right now. They hardly talk or walk, and they got something going on. And I feel pretty fortunate that I got away with as many brain cells as I did, and got out of it in the right time. Fighting is not a sport you can be mediocre at. You're gonna get hurt. I mean, if you're taking fights for the money, you're gonna get hurt. And, I was never that way. I was too competitive, and if I don't have a chance to win, I don't want to do it.